They didn't see it coming. 3 Marines, 1 woman, a training knife pressed against fabric. The blade moved slowly, deliberately cutting through her uniform shirt from collarbone downward. Not to wound, to humiliate. The corridor was empty. No witnesses, no cameras covering this blind spot in the equipment bay. Just 3 men who'd learned that isolation plus intimidation equaled immunity. 3 men who'd done this before and gotten away with it. They called it correction. Standards enforcement. Making sure everyone knew their place. What they didn't know was that the woman standing between them wore silence like a weapon. That her patience wasn't weakness. That in exactly 47 seconds, she would demonstrate what it meant when 39 years of unpaid promises finally came due. But before that knife hit the concrete floor, before 3 trained Marines ended up flat on their backs wondering what the hell just happened, you need to understand how we got here. Because this story doesn't start in a California desert corridor in March 2024. It starts 39 years earlier in the darkness beneath a Grenada airfield where a 23-year-old combat medic made a choice that would echo across 4 decades. The tunnel smelled like cordite and fear. Captain Thaddeus Brennan pressed his back against damp concrete M16A1, raised finger on the trigger guard. 27 years old, 9 years in the Marines, 7 of them in infantry, and this was the first time he genuinely thought he might not see sunrise. Point Saline's airfield sat above them. Medical students waited for rescue. Cuban forces had dug in hard, turned this place into a fortress. And these tunnels, these goddamn claustrophobic passages beneath the runway, were where the real fight happened. Close quarters, darkness, AK-47 fire echoing off walls until you couldn't tell which direction death was coming from. Actual, this is Delta 3 tunnels are clear to checkpoint Charlie. His radio operator, Corporal Hayes, moved ahead, weapon light cutting through the dark. Behind them, Sergeant Diaz and PFC Rourke maintained rear security. 4 Marines, standard fire team, moving through enemy infrastructure looking for Cuban holdouts. Stone, they called him. Not because he was hard, though. 9 years of service had stripped away anything soft. But because once Thaddeus Brennan set his feet, once he decided on a course of action, God himself couldn't move him. Right now, he wished he could move faster. The explosion, when it came, sounded like the world ending. Stone's last conscious thought was that he should have listened to his little sister. Marielle had written him 2 weeks ago her neat handwriting on Red Cross stationery from Camp Lejeune. That I know you think you're invincible. You're not. Come home safe. I'm not digging you out of anything. Then the ceiling came down. Concrete. Rebar. 70 pounds of combat gear suddenly feeling like 700. Stone's legs pinned radio-smashed weapons somewhere in the darkness. He tried to move. Couldn't. Tried to breathe. Barely. Dust filled his throat. Blood filled his mouth. And through the ringing in his ears, he heard boots. Not Marine issue, Cuban. His hand found his radio miraculously still, partially functional. He keyed the mic with fingers he couldn't feel. This is actual. I'm buried. Sector Charlie 3. Tunnel collapsed. Hostiles approaching. Static. Then a voice. Young. Female. Familiar. Actual, this is Doc. I'm coming. No Stone tried to say, but consciousness was slipping. The weight on his chest made words impossible. The last thing he heard before darkness took him was the sound of someone running toward danger instead of away from it. Corpsman Marielle Brennan heard the explosion from 200 meters away. 23 years old. 4 years in service. Navy combat medic attached to Marine infantry, which meant she went where they went, bled when they bled, and carried the weight of knowing that her skill or lack thereof determined who went home alive. She was Stone's little sister, 4 years younger. Grew up in his shadow in Oklahoma, joined up to prove she wasn't just tagging along on his adventure. The Marines thought having siblings in the same unit was a bad idea. Stone had pulled strings to make it happen anyway. We watch each other's backs, he'd said. Who better than blood? Now his blood was soaking into Grenada soil, and Marielle was already moving. Doc, wait for clearance, her squad leader shouted. She didn't wait. The tunnel entrance yawned black. Smoke poured out. Cuban voices echoed from somewhere inside sharp commands in Spanish. They were converging on the collapse point. Standard enemy tactics. Wounded Marines were prizes. Intelligence value. Propaganda value. Marielle went in anyway. Her aid bag bounced against her hip. M9 pistol in her hand, because medics didn't carry rifles, just sidearms, and the hope that the Red Cross on their helmet meant something to whoever was shooting. Her flashlight beam cut through dust and smoke. She found them 30 meters in. Hayes' unconscious head wound, but breathing. Diaz pinned under rubble, conscious, trying to free his legs. Rourke sitting against the wall, pressing field dressing to a shoulder wound that was bleeding too much. And Stone, Her brother, buried under 200 pounds of concrete, only his torso and head, visible, face pale as death. Cuban voices got louder. Marielle made a calculation that would define the next 39 years. She holstered her pistol, grabbed rubble with both hands, started digging. The concrete was sharp. The rebar was sharper. Her tactical gloves lasted maybe 10 seconds before shredding. Then it was just skin and determination. Blood ran down her wrists, dripped onto Stone's face. He stirred, eyes fluttering open. "Doc," he whispered, "get out. Shut up and stay still." She dug faster. A chunk of concrete came free. Then another. Stone's right leg emerged, then his left. She grabbed his body armor, hauled with everything she had, 180 pounds of marine and gear. Physics said she couldn't move him. Physics could go to hell. Stone came free with a wet sucking sound. Marielle dragged him toward the tunnel entrance, boots scraping concrete. Cuban voices right behind them now. AK-47 fire started stitching the walls. She got Stone to Hayes, grabbed Hayes by his vest, dragged both of them. Then she went back. "Doc, no," Rourke shouted. Diaz was still pinned. Marielle ran back through incoming fire, grabbed the rubble, pinning his legs, hauled it off through sheer force of will and adrenaline. Diaz scrambled free. They ran together. A grenade bounced into the tunnel behind them. Marielle shoved Diaz forward, dove. The explosion caught her from behind, shrapnel tearing through her uniform, through her skin, through everything. Her wrists took the worst of it. Metal fragments lacerated tendons, damaged nerves, the radial and ulnar clusters compromised but not severed. Enough function to grip, not enough for precision work. She felt them go numb, then explode into pain that whited out her vision, but she kept moving. She got Diaz to the entrance, went back one more time. Rourke was mobile but fading from blood loss. She threw his arm over her shoulder, hauled him out into Grenada Dawn. 4 Marines saved, 90 seconds under fire. And Marielle Brennan collapsed onto the tarmac with her wrists looking like hamburger meat, blood everywhere, and Stone holding her hands while medics swarmed. "You came back," Stone said. His voice broke. 3 times, "You came back." Marielle's vision was graying out, shock settling in, but she managed to look at him, managed to smile through the pain. "You're my brother. What did you think I'd do?" Then darkness. The field hospital at Point Celine smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Stone woke to fluorescent lights and the beep of monitors. His legs were splinted. His head felt like it had been used as a drum. But he was alive. He turned his head. In the next bed, Marielle lay unconscious, both arms wrapped in gauze from fingertips to elbows. An IV drip, monitors showing vitals that were stable but weak. A Navy surgeon stood at the foot of her bed reviewing charts. Stone tried to sit up, made it about 6 inches before pain stopped him. "Captain Brennan," the surgeon said, not unkindly, "you should rest." "My sister. She'll live. Nerve and tendon damage to both wrists, extensive. We've done what we can, but she's looking at months of physical therapy. Reduced mobility and sensation in her hands. Permanent." Stone's throat closed. "But she can still serve." The surgeon's expression said everything. "Captain, she saved 4 lives today. But combat medicine requires fine motor control. Sutures, IVs, procedures that demand steady hands and precise sensation. Right now, she has maybe 60% function. That's not enough for field work." "Then we fix it." "We're trying, but some things don't fix. They just scar." The surgeon left. Stone lay there staring at his little sister's bandaged arms and felt something crystallize inside him. An obligation that couldn't be repaid with words or medals or anything except the rest of his life. Marielle had given him a future. Saved Hayes Diaz Rourke while she was at it. 4 Marines walking around alive because a 23-year-old corpsman decided her life was worth less than theirs. He would spend every day he had making those extra years count. That was the promise. October 25th, 1985, Grenada. The day Thaddeus Brennan learned what real courage looked like and what he owed it. 3 days later, Marielle woke up, looked at her bandaged wrists, then looked at Stone. "You owe me nothing," she said. "I owe you everything." "Then make these years count, Thad. Don't waste them." He didn't plan to, but some promises take longer to keep than others. Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. March 1987. Corpsman Marielle Brennan stood at attention in Colonel Richard Vaughn's office, wrists still scarred beneath her uniform sleeves, and knew this conversation wouldn't go well. 18 months since Grenada. Silver Star recommendation sitting in paperwork purgatory. Medical Review Board had cleared her for duty with restrictions. No more forward deployment. No more combat operations. But training duty. Administrative work. She could still serve. She'd wanted to keep serving. Instead, she'd spent the last 6 months discovering that sometimes the enemy wore the same uniform you did. Major Kelso had started with comments. Little things. Women don't belong in combat zones. You got lucky in Grenada, when real warriors don't need luck. Then it escalated. Equipment room encounters, standing too close, hands on her shoulders, her waist places, hands shouldn't go. All of it casual, deniable, disguised as mentoring or instruction. When she told him to stop, he'd laughed. When she'd reported it to her immediate superior, she'd been told to toughen up. So she'd gone to Vaughn, executive officer, the man responsible for maintaining standards and discipline, the man who was supposed to protect Marines under his command. Vaughn looked at her formal complaint. Read it slowly. Set it down. Corpsman Brennan, he said, his voice was flat, bureaucratic. I've reviewed your allegations against Major Kelso. I've also reviewed your service record. Grenada was impressive, but since then you've had difficulty adapting to stateside duty. Multiple reports of sensitivity to standard training methods, complaints about treatment that other Marines handle without issue. Marielle's hands clenched. Pain shot up from her scarred wrists. Sir, with respect, Major Kelso's behavior is inappropriate. He's violated regulations regarding... He's been training Marines for 15 years. His methods are aggressive. Some people aren't suited for that environment. The words hung there. Some people, not some Marines, some people, meaning women. Sir, I filed this complaint in good faith, and I'm addressing it in good faith. Corpsman Brennan, let me be direct. Major Kelso is a decorated officer. You're a combat medic who sustained career-limiting injuries and is struggling to adjust. If you pursue this complaint, it will be investigated. But investigations are public. They damage reputations. His, yours, the unit's. Vaughn leaned forward. Or you can withdraw it. Transfer requests are being processed for next quarter. You could request reassignment, fresh start. No black marks on your record. Think about what's best for your career. Marielle understood perfectly. Withdraw and disappear, or fight and be destroyed. She'd saved 4 Marines in Grenada, ran into fire 3 times, shredded her wrists and her future. All of it meant nothing measured against protecting Major Kelso's reputation. I'll need time to consider, she said. You have 48 hours. Marielle saluted, left, found an empty barracks bathroom and threw up. 2 days later, she withdrew the complaint. 3 months later, she discovered she was pregnant. The father was someone she'd dated briefly before things with Kelso started. Someone who was gone, now deployed overseas, not part of this story. 6 months after that, she submitted her resignation. Honorable discharge, medical limitations, and personal circumstances. Stone tried to stop her, made calls, pulled strings, tried to investigate Kelso and Vaughn himself. He was a major now. Grenada had been good to his career, but he wasn't high enough to take on colonels. Wasn't connected enough to fight the system that had decided protecting predators was easier than protecting victims. He failed. Marielle left the Marines in September 1989. 3 months later, she gave birth to a daughter. She named her Kestrel. Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, August 1998. The accident happened on Interstate 40. Semi-truck driver fell asleep, crossed the median, hit Marielle's sedan head-on. She died on impact. Kestrel, 9 years old, asleep in the back seat, survived with minor injuries because her mother had insisted on proper car seat positioning even though she was too old for baby seats. Marielle's last gift. Protection. One more time. Stone got the call at 200 hours. He was a lieutenant colonel now stationed at Quantico. 39 years old, never married, career Marine, and suddenly guardian of a 9-year-old girl who just lost her mother. He flew to Oklahoma, walked into the hospital room. Kestrel sat on the bed, arms wrapped around her knees, face blank with shock. Uncle Thad. He sat next to her, put his arm around her. I'm here, kiddo. Mom's gone. I know. Why? Stone didn't have an answer, not for that question. But he made a decision in that hospital room that shaped the next 16 years. Kestrel would know her mother was a hero, would grow up understanding that Marielle Brennan saved 4 Marines in Grenada, that she earned a Silver Star even though the paperwork got lost in bureaucracy, that she was strong and brave and everything a warrior should be. What Stone didn't tell her, wouldn't tell her for 26 more years, was why Marielle really left the Marines. Some truths weren't for children. Some truths waited until you were old enough to do something about them. Pentagon, Arlington, Virginia, March 2D24. Colonel Thaddeus Brennan sat in a basement office that smelled like old paper and regret studying files that made his chest tight. 66 years old, 41 years in service. Grenada, Panama, Gulf War, Somalia, Fallujah, Afghanistan. 7 countries, 23 campaigns. More decorations than he could fit on his dress uniform, and one failure he'd never forgiven himself for. The files spread across his desk told a story he'd seen before. 7 formal complaints, 18 months. 4 female Marines transferred to different bases. 3 complaints withdrawn after peer counseling sessions. All of it processed through the same executive officer, Major Decker Vaughn. Stone knew that name. Knew it because he'd served briefly with Decker's father, Colonel Richard Vaughn, back in the 80s. Different time, different war, same playbook. The phone on his desk buzzed, encrypted lines, China. Brennan? Uncle Thad, he sat up straighter. Kez, thought you were deployed. Got back yesterday, I'm in Norfolk. Wanted to see you before you retire. Stone's retirement ceremony was scheduled for 6 weeks out. May 15, 2024. End of 41 years, gold watch, speeches. Then what he'd spent his entire adult life in uniform. Didn't know how to be anything else. About that, Stone said, I need to see you first. Pentagon, tomorrow if you can make it. Silence on the line, then carefully, this official, it's family. More silence. Kestrel Brennan, Commander SEAL Team 6 Tier 1 clearance wasn't stupid. She heard the weight in his voice. I'll be there at 0800. Kez, Stone paused, chose his words. How much did your mother tell you about why she left the Marines? The silence stretched longer this time. She said it wasn't for her, that she wanted a different life. She lied. Stone could hear Kestrel's breath catch. I need to show you something. Something I should have shown you years ago. Something I should have fixed 27 years ago and didn't. What are you talking about? Tomorrow, 0800, my office, and Kes clear your schedule. This might take a while. He hung up before she could ask more questions. Stone opened his desk drawer, pulled out a file that had been declassified 2 weeks ago after he'd spent 6 months pushing paperwork and calling in favors. Inside was a formal complaint, dated March 1987, Camp Lejeune, filed by Corpsman Mariel Brennan against Major Vincent Kelso. Beneath it, a dismissal letter, signed by Colonel Richard Vaughn. Beneath that, transfer record showing Kelso served at 4 different bases over the next 15 years. At each base, complaints. At each base, Vaughn or his protégés in administrative positions. At each base, dismissals. A system, perfected over decades, protecting predators, silencing victims. And now Vaughn's son was running the same system at a base in California. Stone's chest tightened. Not anxiety. The other thing, he pulled out another file from his locked cabinet. This one was medical. Oncology report. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Diagnosis January 2024. Prognosis 6 to 9 months with treatment, 3 to 6 without. He'd declined treatment. 41 years was enough, but before those years ended, he had one mission left, one promise unkept for 39 years. Mariel had given him a future, saved him in that Grenada tunnel when by all rights he should have died. Time to make good on what those extra years were for. Stone opened his secure computer, pulled up a personnel file. Staff Sergeant Callaway Winters, 28 years old, 8 years service, exemplary record. Forced medical discharge 18 months ago. Reason cited stress adaptation failure. But Stone had learned to read between lines. Winters had filed a complaint at the California base. Major Decker Vaughn had processed it. 2 weeks later, Winters withdrew the complaint. 4 weeks after that, she was gone. Same pattern as 1987. Same outcome. Unless someone stopped it. Stone's phone buzzes. Text message from an unknown number. Colonel Brennan, I heard you were asking questions about California base. I kept everything. If you're serious about stopping this, I can help. Cal Stone stared at the message. Then another file on his desk. A photo clipped to the corner. Young woman, corpsman uniform, 1996. Standing next to Mariel Brennan during a training exercise at Camp Pendleton 2 years before Mariel's death. The caption read, Corpsman Brennan mentoring new medic Callaway Winters. Full circle. Stone's hands were shaking. Not from age, from rage that had been building for 27 years. He typed a response, meet me tomorrow, 1,000 hours, Pentagon Visitor Center. Then he made another call. This one to Admiral Preston Hall, commanding officer of the California facility. Preston, it's Stone. I'm sending you an evaluation officer. Anonymous integration assessment. She arrives Monday. Brennan, we're already stretched thin with not negotiable, SOCOM authorization. She's cleared for Tier 1 operations. She'll be invisible. You won't even know she's there until she identifies the problem. What problem? The one you've been missing for 18 months. The one that's going to blow up in your face unless we handle it quietly. Stone could hear Hall's jaw tighten through the phone. Understood. I'll have my XO coordinate. No, your XO is part of the problem. Coordinate directly with me. He hung up before Hall could ask more questions. The files were still spread across his desk. Marielle's complaint, Winter's records, Kestrel's service jacket, Vaughn's pattern spanning 4 bases in 27 years. Stone opened his bottom desk drawer, pulled out a photograph. Grenada 1985. Marielle and him both in uniform standing in front of a C-130, 2 days before the invasion. She was grinning. He looked serious like always. On the back in Marielle's handwriting, that if anything happens, make sure it means something. Make sure the uniform means something. Love you. Stone set the photo on his desk where he could see it. I'm going to fix it, Doc, he said to the empty office. Took me 39 years, but I'm going to fix it. Tomorrow Kestrel would learn the truth about her mother. Tomorrow the last mission would begin. And in 72 hours, 3 predators at a California base would learn what happened when they cornered the wrong woman, when they assumed silence meant weakness, when they forgot that obligations passed from one generation to the next, growing heavier with each inheritance. Stone closed the files, locked them away. Then he pulled out one more item from his desk, a combat knife, worn handle, blade still carrying old bloodstains that had never been cleaned. The inscription on the handle faded but readable, for Thad keep fighting, MB-85 Marielle's knife. The one she'd used to dig him out of that Grenada tunnel. The one she'd dropped when she'd run back in the 3rd time. He'd kept it for 39 years. Tomorrow he'd start the process of passing it on. To the only person who'd earned it. To Marielle's daughter. To the woman who was about to demonstrate that warrior obligations don't expire. They just wait for the right moment to be collected. Kestrel Brennan arrived at the Pentagon at 07:52 hours. 35 years old, 12 years in naval special warfare, 5 years at Tier 1 clearance. The kind of operator who got called when missions required silence, precision, and absolute certainty that the job would be done right. She wore civilian clothes, jeans jacket, nothing that marked her as military. But the way she moved through the Pentagon corridors told a different story. Economy of motion, situational awareness. Eyes cataloging exits, cover points, potential threats without conscious thought. 12 years of training didn't shut off just because you weren't in combat. Stone's office was exactly where she remembered. Basement level. No windows. The kind of room where careers came to die, quietly buried under paperwork and bureaucratic indifference. She knocked. Heard his voice, older than she remembered, rougher. Come in. Stone stood behind his desk. He looked thinner. Gray hair cropped military short, but there was something else. Something in his posture that made alarm bells ring in Kestrel's head. He was sick. Uncle Thad. She closed the door behind her. What's going on? Stone gestured to the chair. Sit down, Kez. She sat, waited. 12 years of SEAL training had taught her patience. How to wait for the target to present itself. How to hold position until the exact right moment. Stone opened a file, slid it across the desk. Your mother's formal complaint, filed March 1987, Camp Lejeune, against Major Vincent Kelso for harassment and assault. Kestrel picked up the document. Read it slowly. Her mother's handwriting. Precise. Clinical. Describing a pattern of behavior that made Kestrel's hands tighten on the paper. I don't understand. Mom said she left because... She lied. Stone's voice was flat. To protect you, to protect herself from the shame of being forced out. She filed that complaint in good faith, and Colonel Richard Vaughn, the executive officer, dismissed it, told her to withdraw or face career destruction. He slid another document across. She withdrew. 3 months later, she discovered she was pregnant with you. 6 months after that, she resigned. Kestrel stared at the papers, her mother's signature on the withdrawal, dated 3 days after the dismissal letter. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were 9 when she died, then 12, then 15. When exactly was I supposed to tell you that your mother was victimized by the system she'd bled for, that she saved 4 Marines in Grenada and got repaid with harassment and institutional betrayal? Stone leaned forward. His hands were shaking slightly. I tried to investigate, called every favor I had. I was a major. Vaughn was a colonel with connections. The system protected him. Kelso got transferred, kept climbing ranks. Vaughn retired a general. And your mother died thinking she was weak, that she'd failed. Kestrel's vision was blurring. She blinked hard. SEALs didn't cry in briefings. Why are you telling me this now? Stone pulled out more files. Because history is repeating. Vaughn's son, Major Decker Vaughn, is executive officer at Joint Warfare Facility in California, and he's running the same playbook his father perfected. He spread photographs across the desk. 7 women, service records, complaint documents, transfer papers. 7 formal complaints, 18 months, all dismissed by Vaughn. 4 women transferred, 3 complaints withdrawn, and Staff Sergeant Calloway Winters forced medical discharge after filing complaint and trying to fight back. Kestrel picked up Winters' file, read the dates, the pattern, the systematic destruction of a career. Winters was your mother's protege, 1996-1997 Camp Pendleton. Your mother taught her to never stay silent about injustice. Then Winters filed complaint in 2022 and learned what silence costs when Vaughn was in power. Stone paused, coughed. It sounded wet. Uncle Thad, you're sick. Stage 3 pancreatic, 6 months, maybe less. Decline treatment. Why the hell would you? Because I don't have time for treatment. I have time for one mission. This mission. I failed your mother in 1987. I'm not failing again. He pulled out one more file. This one thicker. Tactical briefing format. 3 predators at California base. Corporal Brixton Nash, Lance Corporal Garrett Hull, Private First Class Soren Locke. All protected by Vaughn, and all of my hunting female Marines using pattern perfected over decades. Isolation, intimidation, escalation until assault. Then Vaughn processes complaints, dismisses them, and the cycle continues. Kestrel studied the photographs. Nash looked like every cocky corporal she'd ever met. Hull had the build of someone who used physical size as weapon. Locke's eyes carried calculation, the tactical thinker. You want me to stop them? I want you to infiltrate as anonymous integration officer. Document the pattern. Let them commit. Then demonstrate what Tier 1 means. Stone opened his desk drawer, pulled out a combat knife, worn handle, dried blood still visible on the blade. Inscription faded but readable. For Thad, keep fighting. MB-85 Kestrel's breath caught. This is Mom's knife from Grenada. She used this to dig me out of that tunnel. Dropped it when she ran back in the 3rd time. I kept it 39 years. Now it's yours. He set it on the desk between them. Your mother developed a close-quarters combat technique after Grenada. 3-second protocol for tunnel fighting. Multiple hostiles, confined space, no room for error. She taught it to me. I spent 39 years refining it. Now I teach you. Stone pulled up tactical diagrams on his computer. 3-dimensional models of the equipment bay at California base. Blind corridors. Camera coverage gaps. They'll corner you here. East corridor. No cameras. No witnesses. You'll let them escalate. Document everything. At 47 seconds, when training knife touches fabric, that's Article 128 aggravated assault. That's when you execute Mariel protocol. He clicked through a presentation. Slow motion breakdowns, nerve strike locations, balance disruption angles, control positions. 3 seconds, 3 opponents. Your mother designed it. You deliver it. Kestrel stared at the screen, at her mother's handwriting in the margins of old tactical manuals, at diagrams showing pressure points and leverage mechanics. She developed this after Grenada. After she realized tunnel combat required something faster than standard hand-to-hand. She was a genius at reading human anatomy, knew exactly where to apply pressure for maximum effect with minimum force. Stone coughed again, harder this time. We train starting now. You deploy in 72 hours. I'll run remote command from here. And Kez, his eyes met hers. This is my last mission. Make it count. Kestrel reached across the desk, picked up her mother's knife. The weight felt right in her hand, like it had been waiting. What's the real objective? Justice for your mother, justice for Winters, and 6 others. And making sure Decker Vaughn learns that some obligations take 39 years to collect. And if I'm not fast enough, Stone's expression didn't change. You're Marielle Brennan's daughter. You're already fast enough. They trained for 3 days. Pentagon gym after hours. Stone moved like his body hurt, which it probably did, but his mind was sharp. He demonstrated the technique on a younger Marine volunteer, breaking down each fraction of each second. Kestrel practiced until her hands remembered the movements without thought, until nerve clusters and pressure points became instinct. On the 3rd day, Stone handed her a micro-recorder, encrypted, real-time upload to SOCOM servers. Document everything, every comment, every touch, every boundary violation. At 47 seconds, you have legal justification. Before that, you're assaulting Marines. Timing matters. 47 seconds is a long time to let someone cut your uniform. Your mother waited 90 seconds under fire to pull me out. You can wait 47. They stood in the empty gym. Stone looked older than his 66 years. The cancer was visible now in the hollows of his face, the way he moved with careful precision. Uncle Thad, after this mission, you need to get treatment. After this mission, I'll have done what I needed to do. That's not good enough. It's going to have to be. He pulled her into a hug. Stone wasn't affectionate. Never had been. This was the first time he'd hugged her since her mother's funeral. Your mother saved 4 Marines. You're about to save a lot more by stopping this before it spreads. That's evolution. That's what obligations look like when they compound over generations. Kestrel felt wetness on her cheeks, blinked it away. I won't let you down. I know you won't. You're Marielle's daughter. Failure isn't in your DNA. The next morning, Kestrel boarded transport to California wearing civilian clothes, carrying forged credentials, identifying her as Integration Officer 177. Stone watched from the Pentagon roof oxygen tank beside him that he hadn't needed 3 months ago. He pulled out his phone. Text message to Callaway Winters. Operator is in position. Your evidence will matter in 72 hours. Reply came fast. Tell her to be careful. Vaughn is watching. He suspects something. Stone typed back. She's tier 1. Careful is what she does. He pocketed the phone, looked out over Arlington. All those white headstones, all those warriors who'd paid obligations with their lives. Soon he'd join them. But not yet. Not until this was finished. Joint Warfare Conditioning Facility spread across 600 acres of California desert. Heat pressed down like judgment. The kind of temperature that made tempers short and discipline fray. Perfect environment for predators who'd learned to operate in gaps where oversight grew slack. Kestrel arrived at their 600 hours. No welcome committee. Just a Humvee that dropped her at admin and drove away without comment. Inside, a staff sergeant processed her paperwork without really looking at her. Integration officers came and went. Anonymous evaluators. Nobody worth remembering. You're assigned to mixed unit training rotation. 0700 formation. Equipment bay for gear issue. Questions? No. He stamped her papers, handed her a facility map, pointed toward barracks. Kestrel walked across the yard, morning light breaking over eastern fence line. The base was waking up, voices calling cadence, metallic clatter of weapons prep, the smell of sweat and dust and diesel. She'd been in places like this 100 times. Afghanistan, Iraq, training facilities across 3 continents. But this felt different. This time she was hunting predators who wore the same uniform. The barracks were standard. Triple bunks, metal lockers, concrete floors. She found her assigned rack middle bunk in the back corner and stowed her gear. Minimal. Duffel bag change of uniforms, toiletries. Nothing that suggested anything beyond another faceless integration officer doing time until rotation ended. But in the bottom of that duffel wrapped in a towel was her real gear. Encrypted sat phone, micro recorder, digital camera with telephoto lens, and her mother's grenade knife, the blade that had saved 4 Marines and started an obligation that was finally coming due. She changed into training fatigues. No rank insignia, no name tape, just the numbered armband 177. Anonymous. Unremarkable. Perfect. Formation assembled at 0700. Mixed unit. 60 Marines and sailors rotating through cross-branch training. The stated goal was integration learning to fight alongside different service branches. The reality was friction competition, men trying to prove superiority, women trying to prove they belonged, and 3 men who'd learned that chaos provided cover. Kestrel spotted them immediately. Corporal Brixton Nash stood near the front. 27 years old, dark hair cropped to stubble jaw like a cinder block. His eyes tracked movement with predatory focus. Not looking at people, assessing them, categorizing. Target or threat, weak or strong. Lance Corporal Garrett Hull positioned himself in the second row. 25 broad-shouldered, the kind of mass that came from years in weight rooms. 240 pounds that he wore like armor. Private First Class Soren Locke hung back. 24 wiry, sharp-eyed, the calculating one. Where Nash was direct and Hull was physical, Locke was tactical. Together they were dangerous, not because of individual skill, but because they'd learned to coordinate, to hunt as unit. And right now their eyes were scanning the formation, looking for opportunity. Their gaze passed over Kestrel, dismissed her, moved on. Perfect. The encrypted earpiece in her left ear was nearly invisible. Stone's voice came through quiet and controlled. I have eyes on satellite thermal feed. I see 3 targets converged 40 meters from your position. Kestrel's lips barely moved. Confirmed. Remember the protocol. Observe, document, let them commit. Copy. The day began with PT high-intensity intervals. Sprints, burpees, rope climbs, sandbag carries. The kind of workout designed to break people down before building them back up. Kestrel kept pace with the middle of the pack. Not struggling, not excelling, just competent enough to avoid notice. She watched Nash, Hull, and Locke. They excelled, pushed hard, made sure instructors saw their performance. But between sets, when instructors weren't watching, their attention drifted to the women in formation. Assessing, cataloging. Private Rory McKenna struggled with the rope climb. 22 years old, red hair pulled back in regulation bun. Oklahoma accent that came through even when she was gasping for air. She fell twice, got back up both times. Nash watched her fall, smiled. Not encouragement, amusement. Stone's voice in Kestrel's ear. Target 1 tracking, female Marine grid, Charlie 7. Document, timestamp. Kestrel's recorder was running, clipped inside her uniform pocket, capturing everything. After PT came weapons drills, M4 carbine disassembly and reassembly. Blindfolded, timed, standard Marine qualification. Kestrel took her position at the weapons table. She could do this in 18 seconds, had done it in combat in darkness under incoming fire. Today she took 45, adequate, forgettable. 3 tables over, Locke finished in 22 seconds. Called out his time, made sure everyone heard. Kestrel glanced his way, caught his eyes on her. Not her weapon, her. The way a hunter watches wounded prey. She looked away, let her shoulders curve slightly inward. Subtle body language shift that signaled uncertainty. Locke's smile widened. Stone's voice, target 3 has marked you. Good. Let him think you're vulnerable. By midday, the pattern was established. Kestrel performed adequately but not exceptionally. Made small mistakes. Asked occasional questions. Positioned herself as competent but not threatening. And Nash, Hull, and Locke noticed. Started positioning themselves near her during drills. Not obviously. Just gravitational pull. Orbiting closer. Testing proximity. During lunch break, Kestrel sat alone at a corner table in the chow hall. Ate quickly, kept her head down. The universal signal of someone who didn't want attention. Nash walked past her table. His hip bumped it deliberately. Not hard, just enough to rattle her tray. He kept walking. Didn't look back. Didn't apologize. Kestrel said nothing, but her hand tightened slightly on her fork. Just for a second, then relaxed. Stone's voice, document. Physical contact, deliberate testing boundaries. He's establishing dominance hierarchy. The afternoon brought combat training, MC MAP Marine Corps Martial Arts Program, Level 3 techniques, grappling, joint manipulation, weapon retention. Kestrel was paired with Hull. He outweighed her by 80 pounds, stood 4 inches taller. And when the instructor called engage, he came at her with confidence that bordered on arrogance. She let him take her down. Not dramatically. Just allowed his weight advantage to work. Ended up on her back with him in mount position. He applied pressure, not enough to hurt, just enough to dominate, to prove a point. The instructor called stop. Hull stood, extended a hand to help her up. Kestrel stood without taking it. Subtle, but Hull noticed. His eyes narrowed slightly. You okay? False concern, the kind of question that wasn't really a question. Fine, Kestrel said, neutral tone. No challenge, no submission. They reset, engaged again. This time Kestrel defended better, not winning, just making him work for it, showing enough skill that he couldn't dismiss her entirely, but not so much that he'd recognize danger. After the 3rd round, Hull was breathing hard. Kestrel's breathing remained steady. He noticed that too. Stone's voice, good. You're showing capability without revealing capacity. He's confused. Confusion breeds commitment. The day wore on, drill after drill, exercise after exercise. And through it all, Nash, Hull, and Locke kept circling closer, testing boundaries, pushing limits, seeing how far they could go before she reacted. Kestrel gave them nothing. No anger, no fear, just neutral competence and carefully calibrated vulnerability. Because Stone had taught her something fundamental during her SEAL training, something he'd learned in Grenada tunnels and refined over 41 years. Predators don't hunt what scares them. They hunt what looks like prey. So if you want to catch a predator, you have to make them believe they're hunting you. You have to let them commit fully. Let them cross every line until retreat is impossible. And then when they're fully exposed, when they've eliminated all deniability, that's when you show them what you really are. By 1800 hours, Kestrel was exactly where she needed to be. Established as a presence, noticed but not remarkable, vulnerable but not helpless. The perfect target for men who'd learned that institutional protection meant they could hunt without consequence. She returned to barracks, showered, changed into fresh fatigues, then walked to the equipment bay on the eastern edge of the facility. The building was older, cinder block walls, narrow corridors, blind corners where observation was limited and opportunities for isolation abundant. She walked through slowly, memorizing layout, exits, sight lines, camera positions, everything she'd need when the moment came. Because it would come. Maybe tomorrow, maybe 3 days from now. But it would come. Men like Nash, Hull, and Locke always escalated, always pushed boundaries until something stopped them. And so far, nothing had. That was about to change. Kestrel mapped the eastern corridor carefully. 30 meters long, equipment racks on both sides, no windows, single camera at the entrance, but its angle didn't cover the far end, a blind spot. Perfect kill zone for predators who'd learned to avoid observation. She spent 5 minutes in that corridor, long enough to be seen, long enough for them to know she went there alone. Then she left, returned to barracks, lay in her bunk, stared at the ceiling, thought about her mother, 23 years old, running into fire 3 times to save 4 Marines, shredding her wrists, ending her combat career before it really started. Thought about 1987, her mother filing complaint in good faith, being dismissed, being forced to choose between silence and destruction. Thought about the pattern repeating. Winters forced out, 6 others silenced. And the system protecting predators because that was easier than protecting victims. Not anymore. Kestrel's encrypted phone buzzed. Text from Stone. Day 1 complete. Assessment. She typed back, they're hunting, committed but not fully, need 36 more hours. Agreed, get rest. Tomorrow they escalate. How do you know? Because I've been watching men like this for 41 years. They follow patterns. Nash will increase verbal harassment. Hull will test physical boundaries. Locke will coordinate timing. By day 3 evening, they'll be ready to strike. And if they deviate from pattern, they won't. Predators are predictable. That's what makes them catchable. Kestrel set the phone down, reached into her duffel, pulled out her mother's knife. The blade was old, worn, but still sharp. Blood stains that had never been cleaned because Stone had kept it as memorial, not tool. Now it was tool again. She ran her thumb along the inscription. For Thad, keep fighting, MB in 85. Her mother had carried this in Grenada, had used it to dig through rubble, had dropped it when she'd run back into fire the 3rd time. Marielle Brennan had saved 4 Marines with this blade. Tomorrow her daughter would use it to end a pattern that had lasted 27 years. Kestrel closed her eyes. Sleep came easily, because she knew something the predators didn't, something Stone had taught her through Fallujah stories and Grenada lessons in 41 years of accumulated wisdom. That the difference between strength and cruelty matters. That discipline and domination aren't the same thing. That some warriors build people up while predators tear them down. Tomorrow she'd demonstrate that difference in 3 seconds. And in 48 hours, that's exactly what would happen. The corridor was waiting. The knife was ready. The moment was coming. And Commander Kestrel Brennan, daughter of Medal of Honor recipient Marielle Brennan, was prepared to demonstrate what it meant when 39 years of institutional promises finally came due. Tomorrow would be 3 seconds long. 3 seconds that would prove Stone's 41 years of teaching. 3 seconds that would honor her mother's 90 seconds under fire. 3 seconds that would end 39 years of institutional rot. And when those 3 seconds were over, when the predators were neutralized and the pattern was broken, justice would finally arrive. But that was tomorrow. Tonight she was still prey, still vulnerable, still waiting for the exact right moment when patience stopped being defense and became the most devastating weapon of all. Day 2 began with dawn breaking over California desert like a threat. The heat was already building at 0600, the kind of oppressive temperature that made uniforms stick to skin, made tempers fray, made judgment slip just enough for true character to show through the cracks. Kestrel woke before her alarm. Muscle memory from 12 years of operations where waking late meant dying early. She dressed in darkness, other Marines still sleeping around her, and walked out into pre-dawn gray. The base was quiet, a few sentries, a skeleton crew prepping for morning formation. And in the distance, lights on in the administrative building where officers started their days before the enlisted rose. Stone's voice came through her earpiece. He must not be sleeping much either. Day 2, this is when they transition from observation to testing. Expect increased verbal harassment. Boundary violations will become more overt. They're building confidence. How's your health? Kestrel asked quietly. Irrelevant. Focus on mission. Uncle Thad, the cancer will wait. This won't. Remember, your mother waited 90 seconds under fire. You can handle 48 hours of harassment. The line went quiet but stayed connected. Stone watching through satellite feeds and remote cameras he'd somehow accessed. The man was dying and still pulling strings across the Department of Defense like he had 40 years left instead of 6 months. Formation at 6:30, earlier than standard. Surprise PT test announced by the instructor, a gunnery sergeant who looked like he ate nails for breakfast. 3-mile run, full combat load, 45 pounds of gear. Temperature already climbing toward 95 degrees. The kind of run that separated committed from casual. That revealed who maintained their conditioning and who'd let it slip. Kestrel fell in with the middle of the pack, not leading, not struggling, just maintaining. Her breathing steady stride, economical, conserving energy the way Stone had taught her during their first desert training exercise. Heat is a weapon, he'd said, standing in Arizona sun without breaking a sweat. Use it against opponents who haven't learned to respect it. Let them burn themselves out while you stay controlled. Behind her, she heard Hull's heavy breathing, not struggling, but working harder than necessary, pushing to maintain position near her rather than running his own race. Tactical error. Letting target selection override operational efficiency. They were committed now. Fully engaged, which meant the timeline was accelerating. The run ended. Kestrel finished in the middle third. Adequate, unmemorable. She took water, rehydrated properly, and watched as Nash approached Private Rory McKenna, who'd finished near the back of the pack. Struggling today, Private, Nash's voice carried false concern, the kind of question designed to humiliate while sounding helpful. Rory's face flushed. No, Corporal. Could have fooled me. You were at the back with the stragglers. Standards keep people alive, McKenna. When you can't maintain them, you put everyone at risk. He stepped closer, invaded her space, made her look up to meet his eyes. Rory said nothing, but her hands clenched at her sides. Kestrel saw it, the fear, the recognition. This wasn't the first time Nash had targeted her. Stone's voice, document, timestamp 0714, target 1 verbal harassment of Private McKenna. Pattern established. Kestrel's recorder was running, capturing everything. The morning continued with weapons qualifications, M4 carbine moving targets, stress fire exercises, the kind of shooting that required focus under pressure. Kestrel took her position on the line, loaded her magazine, 28-round standard combat load. The weapon felt comfortable in her hands. Extension of intention, tool calibrated to purpose. The targets appeared, pop-up silhouettes at varying distances. She engaged. Controlled pairs, center mass, rhythm, matching heartbeat. She scored 41 out of 50. Qualified expert by Marine standards, but not exceptional. Not memorable. Several shooters scored higher, including Locke, who made sure everyone knew his 47. But what Locke didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Kestrel had deliberately missed 9 shots. Grouped them in a pattern that looked like wind drift and stress rather than intentional placement. Because exceptional shooting would have raised questions, would have made her remarkable, would have broken her cover as just another integration officer. And she needed them to keep underestimating her for 30 more hours. By midday, the harassment had escalated. During hand-to-hand combat drills, Hull was again paired with Kestrel. This time his techniques were rougher. Pressure applied longer than necessary. Positions held beyond the instructor's call to break. Not enough to cause injury, just enough to establish dominance. When they reset for the 3rd round, Hull leaned close. His breath was hot against her ear. "You're tougher than you look. I like that." The words weren't compliment. They were assessment. Predator confirming prey characteristics before committing to the hunt. Kestrel didn't respond, just reset her stance. Let the drill continue. But she cataloged the comment, timestamped it, added it to the pattern of escalation that would matter when she needed to justify what came next. Stone's voice, document confirmed. Article 93, cruelty and maltreatment. He's building a case against himself. Lunch came and went. Kestrel ate alone again. Nash walked past her table, but this time he didn't just bump it. He stopped, looked down at her meal. That all you're eating, false concern again. Need to maintain your strength out here. Never know when you'll need it. The threat was implicit, wrapped in words that could be defended as helpful. But the tone carried weight. Suggestion. Promise. Kestrel met his eyes, held them for exactly 2 seconds, long enough to show she'd heard, not long enough to be challenging. Then looked back down at her food. Nash smiled, walked away. But as he passed, his hand brushed her shoulder. Brief contact. Casual. Deniable. But Kestrel felt it for what it was. Territory being marked. Boundaries being tested. The predator announcing his intention before the strike. Stone's voice was tight with controlled anger. 30 hours. You have 30 hours left. The afternoon brought tactical movement exercises, squad-based operations, moving through simulated urban terrain, learning to coordinate across service branches. Kestrel was assigned to a mixed squad, 6 Marines, 4 sailors. She positioned herself in the middle of the formation. Not point, not rear security, just another body in the tactical movement. Locke ended up next to her, close, closer than tactical spacing required. When they moved through a narrow corridor in the kill house, his body pressed against hers. Not accidental, deliberate. Tight quarters, he muttered. Gotta get comfortable being close to your teammates. His hand brushed her hip, then her lower back. Brief contacts that could be explained as navigational adjustment, but weren't. Kestrel kept moving, didn't react, but she marked the escalation. Verbal to physical, testing to touching. They were accelerating faster than Stone had projected, which meant the timeline might compress. She adjusted her operational planning accordingly. That evening, instead of returning directly to barracks, Kestrel walked the facility perimeter, familiarizing herself with layout, memorizing routes, identifying choke points. Everything she'd need when documentation phase transitioned to intervention phase. She passed the equipment bay, the building where this would end, where pattern would be broken and obligations would be paid. She studied the approaches, the blind corridor on the eastern side, the storage area with limited visibility, the perfect trap for predators who'd learned to avoid observation. Tomorrow or the next day, she'd engineer a situation, create opportunity, make herself available in exactly the wrong place at exactly the wrong time. And when they took that opportunity, when they crossed from harassment to assault, she'd document it, then dismantle it, then ensure it never happened again. But tonight she was still prey, still vulnerable, still letting them believe they controlled this hunt. She returned to barracks, lay in her bunk, closed her eyes. But sleep didn't come immediately. Her mind was running through scenarios, calculating probabilities, wargaming responses. 3 opponents, coordinated, operating on their ground with institutional protection and established patterns. Under normal circumstances, that would be overwhelming odds. But these weren't normal circumstances, because they didn't know they were fighting. They thought they were hunting, thought their target was isolated and vulnerable and powerless. They were wrong on all 3 counts. Kestrel finally slept, deep dreamless, the sleep of someone who knew exactly what was coming and had prepared for every variation. Day 3 dawned hotter, the kind of heat that made everything harder, that eroded patience and judgment. That created the conditions where men who'd been circling finally decided to strike. Morning PT was brutal. High-intensity circuits, burpees, mountain climbers, rope climbs, sandbag carries. The kind of workout designed to break people down. Nash positioned himself next to Kestrel during the rope climb, watched as she ascended. His eyes tracked her movement with predatory focus. When she descended, he was waiting at the bottom. Good form, he said, then added, for someone your size. The qualifier was deliberate, reminder of physical disparity, establishment of hierarchy. Kestrel nodded, said nothing, moved to the next station, but she noted the shift. Yesterday had been testing, today was decision. They'd moved from assessment to commitment, which meant the window was closing. During the mid-morning break, Kestrel made her first deliberate move. She approached the equipment bay alone, visibly alone, walking with purpose, but no apparent awareness of vulnerability. Inside the bay, she browsed through gear, checking inventory, examining equipment, playing the role of integration officer, doing her job. She felt them before she saw them. Nash, Hull, Locke, entering the bay separately but converging. Not surrounding her yet, just positioning, creating opportunity. Their conversation was loud enough for her to hear, talking about the morning's PT, about weakness, about standards, about people who couldn't maintain them. The words were aimed at her without being directed to her. Psychological pressure, establishing dominance through proximity and implication. Kestrel finished her inventory check, turned to leave, found her path partially blocked. Not completely, just enough to make her navigate around them, to force close contact. She moved, chose her angle carefully, and as she passed, Hull's shoulder bumped hers. Harder than necessary. Physical escalation disguised as crowded navigation. Careful, he said, false apology. Tight spaces. Kestrel said nothing, just kept walking, left the equipment bay, returned to the training yard. But she'd accomplished her objective, established pattern, created opportunity. Now they knew she went to the equipment bay alone. Knew she was accessible. Knew she was vulnerable. Tomorrow she'd do it again, and tomorrow they'd be ready. They'd corner her properly, in the blind corridor where no cameras reached, where no witnesses would see, and then she'd show them what Tier 1 meant. The afternoon brought more tactical exercises, movement under fire, stress inoculation, learning to function when chaos erupted, and precision became survival. During one exercise, Locke ended up behind Kestrel in a stacked entry formation, his hands on her hips, ostensibly for tactical communication, actually for dominance, for continued boundary violation. Stay tight, he muttered. Follow my lead. His grip tightened, fingers digging in, pressure applied, message sent. Kestrel didn't pull away, didn't protest, just accepted the contact. Because protest would have been resistance, and resistance would have been acknowledgement. And acknowledgement would have validated their behavior as meaningful rather than pathetic. She waited until the exercise completed, then stepped away. Casual, unremarkable, as if the contact hadn't registered. But it had. She documented it mentally. Time, location, witnesses. Everything she'd need when the formal report was filed. After intervention. After they were on the ground wondering what the hell just happened. That evening, Kestrel made contact with Stone. Encrypted call from a secure location outside the barracks. Timeline accelerating, she said without preamble. Estimate 24 hours before they commit fully. Stone's voice carried the weight of someone who'd been watching this pattern for decades. Equipment bay, Eastern Corridor. Tomorrow around 1400 hours. Engineer isolation. Witnesses. I'll ensure response time allows for observation before intervention. MPs will be staged but not visible. You'll have 60 seconds. I won't need 60. I'll need 15. 60 is for cleanup. She heard Stone smile through the encrypted line. That's my student. How are you feeling? Irrelevant. Uncle Thad, I'm feeling determined. That's all that matters. Tomorrow we end this. 39 years of failure gets corrected in 3 seconds. The line went quiet for a moment. Kez, there's something you should know. Callaway Winters will be on base tomorrow. Observing from administrative building. She wants to see this. The woman Mom trained. The woman your mother mentored in 96, 97. Marielle taught her never to stay silent. Then Winters filed complaint in Tweeter 2 and learned what silence cost when Vaughn was in power. She's been carrying that for 18 months. Tomorrow she gets closure. Kestrel felt something tighten in her chest. No pressure then. You're Marielle's daughter. Pressure is what you were built for. They ended the call. Kestrel returned to barracks, lay in her bunk, ran through the scenarios one more time. 3 opponents, coordinated but not trained in actual combat. Confident but not competent. Predators but not warriors. Against a Tier 1 SEAL operator who'd spent 12 years learning exactly how to dismantle opponents efficiently and without wasted motion. Who'd been trained by a man who'd survived Grenada tunnels and Desert Storm chaos, in Somalia streets, and Fallujah firefights. Who'd internalized lessons paid for in blood across 41 years of service. The fight wouldn't be fair. But fairness wasn't the objective. Justice was. And justice delivered properly was swift and surgical and absolutely final. Kestrel's last thought before sleep was her mother's voice. Not a memory because she barely remembered her mother's voice, but an imagined version, what Marielle might have said. Warriors protect, baby girl. That's what we do. We dig people out of rubble. We run into fire. We pay obligations we didn't incur because that's what honor means. Tomorrow would bring that honor. Tomorrow would balance scales that had been tipped in favor of predators for too long. Tomorrow would teach 3 men that uniform didn't grant immunity and institutional protection eventually meant individual accountability. Tomorrow, Kestrel Brennan would stop being prey and remind everyone what real operators look like. But tonight she slept, because tomorrow required clarity, focus, the kind of precision that only came from being fully rested and absolutely certain. And Kestrel was certain. Had been certain since Stone first briefed her. Had been certain since she read her mother's complaint. Had been certain since she felt Hull's hands on her hips and Locke's breath on her neck. and Nash's eyes tracking her like wounded game, certain that predators, when properly confronted, weren't actually dangerous. They were just cowards who'd learned to operate in the absence of accountability. Tomorrow, accountability arrived. Wearing fatigues and numbered armband 177 and 12 years of SEAL training and 39 years of institutional wisdom, passed down from a man who understood that warriors who protect matter more than predators who prey. Tomorrow the knife would cut her shirt. Then the knife would hit the floor. Then 3 predators would learn what happened when prey turned out to be predator, when silence turned out to be strategy, when patience turned out to be weapon. Tomorrow would be 3 seconds long. But those 3 seconds would reshape everything that came after. Day 4 came like judgment. The heat pressed down even before sunrise. Sky the color of old bruises, air thick enough to taste. The kind of morning that felt like something was about to break. Kestrel woke at 0500, earlier than necessary, but she needed time. Time to center herself, to run through scenarios one final time, to ensure every variable was accounted for and every response was calibrated. She dressed slowly, standard fatigues, boots laced tight, hair secured, everything regulation, everything squared away. Because when this was over, when MPs arrived and reports were filed and Admiral Hall asked questions, there couldn't be any detail that suggested anything except professional conduct, right up until the moment self-defense became necessary. Morning formation was tense, the heat already oppressive, tempers short, discipline fraying at the edges, perfect conditions. Nash, Hull, and Locke positioned themselves near Kestrel during PT, closer than yesterday, almost crowding, the circle tightening, predators moving from assessment to action. During the cool-down stretch, Locke moved next to her, close enough that his shoulder touched hers. "You going to the equipment bay later?" The question was casual, too casual. "Probably," Kestrel said, neutral, unremarkable. "Need to check some inventory. We'll be there around 1400, gear maintenance." Not an offer, an announcement. Territory being claimed. Kestrel nodded, said nothing more. But inside the tactical clock started running. 1400 hours. Equipment bay, eastern corridor, exactly as projected. Everything was in position. Now she just had to wait. The morning dragged. Training exercises, drills, the routine that had become familiar over 4 days. But underneath the routine tension building, the sense of something imminent. At 1330 hours, Kestrel walked to the equipment bay, earlier than she'd indicated. Deliberate choice. Let them find her. Let them think this was opportunity rather than trap. She moved through the main storage area, past rows of gear, combat packs, helmets, body armor, the implements of military function arranged in precise order. She moved toward the eastern corridor, the narrow passage between equipment racks where visibility was limited and cameras couldn't reach. The blind spot, the killing floor, the place where Staff Sergeant Calloway Winters had been cornered and broken and eventually driven out of service. Not today. Today, that pattern ended. Kestrel positioned herself halfway down the corridor, examining a rack of training equipment, back partially turned. Vulnerable, available, perfect prey. She heard them before she saw them. Boots on concrete, 3 sets moving with coordinated purpose. Not rushing, just converging. Predators who'd done this before. Who knew the timing? Who understood how to isolate targets? They entered the corridor, spread out, blocking exits, Nash in front, Hull to the left, Locke behind, triangle formation. Tactical positioning that would have been impressive if it wasn't being used for harassment. Stone's voice came through her earpiece. Quiet, controlled. "I have eyes on satellite thermal feed. 3 targets converged your position. MPs staged. Response time 60 seconds on my mark." Kestrel's lips barely moved. "Copy." Nash spoke first. "Didn't expect to see you here, 177. False surprise, the same script they'd used before. "Inventory check," Kestrel said, kept her voice neutral, didn't turn fully, didn't acknowledge the positioning. "We can help with that." Hull moving closer. Teamwork, integration. They were escalating faster than previous days. Confidence building, certainty settling. They'd decided this was the moment. This was where they'd push beyond harassment into assault. Where they'd teach her that silence meant submission and isolation meant vulnerability and female meant target. They were about to learn differently. "I'm fine," Kestrel said, kept her tone even. "Almost done." "Don't think you are." Locke had moved behind her, close, too close. "Think you need some correction, form adjustment. You've been doing things wrong out there. His hand reached for her shoulder, not gentle, claiming ownership. Kestrel stepped away, smooth motion, not panicked, just creating distance. I don't need adjustment. Yeah, you do. Nash moved closer, the triangle tightening. See, we've been watching you. 4 days now. You're sloppy, weak. That's dangerous. Puts everyone at risk when you can't maintain standards. My standards are fine. No, Hull said, moving into her space. They're not, and we're going to show you why. His hand shot out, grabbed her uniform shirt at the collar. Not violent yet, but possessive, controlling. The physical line crossed. Let go, Kestrel said. Her voice remained calm, but something had shifted in her tone. Warning delivered. Hull smiled. Or what? Locke produced a training knife, rubberized blade, non-lethal. But the message was clear. This was demonstration, humiliation. The same pattern that had worked on Winters and 3 other women before her. Here's what's going to happen, Nash said. His voice carried absolute certainty, the confidence of a predator who'd never been stopped. We're going to teach you about standards, about what happens when you don't meet them, about knowing your place. Locke stepped closer, the knife in his hand, not threatening with it yet, just holding it, showing it. Psychological pressure before physical assault. Your shirt's too tight, Locke said. Doesn't meet regulation, let's fix that. The knife moved, slow, deliberate, pressed against the fabric of her uniform shirt. Not cutting yet, just touching. Just demonstrating control. Step back, Kestrel said. Still calm, still controlled. Final warning. Or what? Nash asked, mocking. You going to report us good luck with that? We know how this works. No witnesses, no cameras, just your word against ours. And we're good Marines. You're just another integration officer who couldn't handle the pressure. The knife bit fabric, parted it, a clean slice from collarbone downward. Not deep, not wounding, just cutting, exposing, humiliating. They were smiling, all 3, confident, certain. Predators who'd learned that isolation plus intimidation plus institutional protection equaled immunity. They'd learned wrong. Stone's voice in her ear, 47 seconds, execute. The knife moved for a second cut. Locke's hand steady, his face showing satisfaction. The pleasure of dominance, of power without consequence. That's when Kestrel moved, and everything changed. Her right hand snapped upward, lightning fast. Seized Locke's wrist at the exact point where nerve cluster met bone. Fingers positioned with surgical precision. Thumb on the radial nerve index and middle fingers on the ulnar pressure point. Pressure applied. Not with strength, with anatomical knowledge. The kind of technique that turned joints into leverage points and leverage points into weapons. Locke's fingers spasmed. Involuntary nerve response. Neural overload forcing the hand open. The knife clattered to concrete. Before the sound finished, echoing Kestrel's left hand drove upward. Palm strike to chin. Not wild, not emotional. Calculated. 45-degree angle. Force transmitted through jaw into equilibrium center in the inner ear. Locke's head snapped back. His body followed. Balance disrupted. Control severed. Kestrel's hip rotated. Classic judo throw, using his weight and momentum. Redirecting rather than opposing. Locke hit the ground. Hard. Wind expelled. Confusion replacing confidence. Elapsed time. 4 seconds. Hull charged. His size, his weapon. 240 pounds of mass aimed at overwhelming. He reached for her. Grabbed her uniform. Started to lift. Kestrel went with the motion. Didn't resist. Used his momentum. Her arms snaked around his neck. Not choking, controlling. Rear naked choke position, but modified. One hand on his wrist. The other driving his elbow toward hyperextension. Shoulder joint stressed. Ligaments stretched to limit, but not beyond. 170 degrees. 180 breaks bone. She stopped at 170. The pop was audible. Not fracture, just ligament stretch. Pain without permanent damage. Hull screamed, high-pitched, pain overriding aggression. Kestrel controlled his descent, put him on the concrete, face down, arm locked, not broken, just comprehensively controlled. Elapsed time 3.1 seconds. Nash moved, not toward Kestrel, toward the knife. Tactical thinking, arm the opponent, then engage. Smart, but too slow. Because Kestrel's boot was already moving. Intercepted his hand 6 inches from the blade. Pinned it to concrete, exact pressure. No breaks. Just pain. Just lesson. Nash tried to rise. Kestrel's other foot swept his base. Knee to ground, then full mount. Forearm across throat. Not crushing, controlling. His options eliminated. His choices removed. His certainty shattered. Total elapsed time 3.7 seconds. Done, Kestrel asked. Her breathing steady, not even elevated. As if dismantling 3 opponents was routine, which for her it was. Nash's eyes were wide, confusion warring with comprehension. His mouth worked. No words came. I asked if you're done, Kestrel repeated. Still calm, still controlled, still absolutely certain. Yeah, Nash gasped. Yeah, we're done. Good. Kestrel stood. Smooth motion, no hesitation. She stepped back, created distance, let them breathe, but didn't let them recover. That's when footsteps echoed. Multiple sets, moving fast. MPs rounded the corner, Gunnery Sergeant Torres in the lead, 2 corporals behind him, Admiral Hall 30 seconds behind them. And walking beside Hall using a rolling oxygen tank for support was Colonel Thaddeus Brennan. Stone had flown in overnight. Dying man who'd somehow convinced military transport to get him here for the ending. They rounded the corner, saw 3 Marines on the ground, one gasping, one cradling his shoulder, one staring at the ceiling like he'd seen Mom and learned God didn't like him, and one woman standing in the middle, torn shirt held together with one hand, breathing steady, expression neutral. Torres's hand moved toward his sidearm, reflex, then stopped. Because something in the scene didn't match expectations. The woman wasn't panicked, wasn't scared, wasn't victim. She was calm, collected, standing like someone who'd just completed a training exercise rather than survived assault. Commander, Torres said, then stopped. Commander Kestrel reached into her pocket, produced the black ID wallet, opened it without word. Let the credentials speak. Torres took it. His face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, something approaching awe. Commander Kestrel Brennan, he read aloud. Naval Special Warfare, SEAL Team 6, Tier 1 clearance. SOCOM investigator. The corridor went silent. Even Hull's gasping stopped because those words, Tier 1 SOCOM SEAL, they carried weight. They meant something. They meant the woman they'd cornered wasn't prey. She was predator, had always been predator, had just been patient enough to let them commit before demonstrating exactly what she was. Admiral Hall arrived, took in the scene. His face hardened with understanding and shame. Because this had happened on his base, under his watch, and he'd missed it until SOCOM sent someone to expose it. Sergeant Torres secured these 3. Medical isolation, no communication. I want statements from everyone in this facility who had contact with them over the past 4 days. Yes, sir. Stone moved forward slowly, oxygen tank rolling beside him. 66 years old and visibly dying, but eyes sharp and focused. Commander Brennan, he said formally, are you injured? No, sir. Do you require medical attention? No, sir. Do you wish to file charges? Kestrel looked down at Nash, at Hull, at Locke. 3 predators who'd learned that institutional protection wasn't absolute, that eventually accountability arrived. I don't file charges, Admiral, she said, looking at Hall now. I make recommendations, and I recommend you call SOCOM immediately, because what happened here is an isolated incident. It's visible part of systemic failure, and the Department of Defense needs full debrief. Hall nodded. Sergeant, get these 3 out of here. As MPs moved to secure the 3 Marines, Nash looked up at Kestrel, his face carrying questions he couldn't articulate. How? Why, what just happened? Kestrel met his eyes, held them. When she spoke, her voice carried something beyond calm, carried certainty, authority. The weight of 12 years proving herself and 39 years of institutional wisdom passed down from a man who'd taught her that warriors who stand up matter more than predators who prey down. You made 3 mistakes, she said quietly. First, you assumed silence meant weakness. Second, you assumed isolation meant vulnerability. Third, you assumed that cutting a woman's uniform meant you were in control. She paused. Let it sink in. You were wrong on all 3 counts. And now you'll have the rest of your very short military careers to think about why. She turned, walked toward the exit, left them on the ground with MPs and comprehension and the slow realization that everything they'd believed about power and protection and immunity had been illusion. That real operators didn't announce themselves. They just operated. And when predators emerged, real operators dismantled them with surgical precision, no rage, no hesitation, just the certainty that came from 12 years of training and 39 years of inherited wisdom. Behind her, the corridor emptied, MPs hauling away 3 careers that had just ended. Hall already on his phone with SOCOM, Torres securing the scene, evidence being documented, patterns being revealed, the machinery of institutional accountability finally engaging. Because one operator had been patient enough to let predators commit before demonstrating exactly what Tier 1 meant. Stone caught up to her outside the equipment bay, moving slowly, oxygen mask to his face between words. "Well done," he said. "Your mother would be proud." Kestrel felt her eyes burning, blinked hard. "Is this what you felt after Grenada? After she saved you?" Stone considered that. "No, what I felt was obligation. What you should feel is completion. You didn't just stop 3 predators. You demonstrated that the system can be fixed. That institutional rot, when properly confronted, isn't invincible." He coughed, wet and painful. "Uncle Thad, you need to sit. I need to see this through, the trial, the reforms, and then," he looked at her, "then I get to tell your mother I kept my promise." Over the next 72 hours, everything moved fast. Nash, Hull, and Locke were confined to medical isolation, separated. No communication with each other or anyone else on base. Their confessions came within 24 hours. All 3. Detailed admissions of harassment spanning 18 months. Names of victims, dates of incidents, everything. Because faced with video evidence, audio recordings, and the testimony of a Tier 1 operator whose credibility was unimpeachable, they had nothing left except honesty. Major Decker Vaughn fought harder, claimed selective prosecution, argued he'd been defending Marines who were maintaining standards, wrapped himself in 30 years of service in tradition and honor. None of it mattered because Callaway Winters had evidence, 18 months of documentation, audio recordings of Vaughn coaching the 3 men, emails discussing problem females and adaptation issues, patterns spanning 4 bases where Vaughn had served, and beneath that, Stone produced the 1987 files. Marielle's complaint, Colonel Richard Vaughn's dismissal letter, transfer records showing the same pattern across different decades. A system, perfected over 39 years, protecting predators, silencing victims, passed from father to son like family business. The court-martial proceedings were swift. Nash, Hull, and Locke received dishonorable discharges, 6 to 8 years in federal prison, permanent loss of benefits, lifetime prohibition from federal employment, not just punishment, elimination, ensuring they could never wear uniform or claim authority again. Vaughn's sentence was harsher, 15 years federal prison, total forfeiture of pension and benefits. Every penny he'd earned over 30 years, gone. When the verdict was read, Vaughn's face showed something Kestrel recognized. Not just shock, comprehension. The slow realization that protection hadn't been permanent, that institutional immunity had been illusion, that accountability, delayed but not denied, had finally arrived. 2 days after Vaughn's verdict, Kestrel sat beside Stone's hospital bed in Walter Reed Medical Center. He looked smaller now. The cancer had taken 50 pounds in 6 months. Oxygen tubes, IV lines, monitors beeping softly. But his eyes were clear. "You saw the verdict?" Kestrel asked. Stone nodded slowly. "Watched it on Armed Forces Network. 15 years. Your mother would have..." His voice caught. "She would have been proud." Kestrel held his hand. The same hand that had held hers at her mother's funeral. The same hand that had trained her in that Pentagon gym 3 months ago. "I need to tell you something," Stone said. His voice was quiet but steady. 1987, when your mother filed that complaint, I tried to stop her." Kestrel went still. "I told her it wouldn't work, that Vaughn was too connected, that she should transfer quietly and forget about it. I thought I was protecting her career." He coughed. "I was protecting mine. Uncle Thad, I was a major, political animal. I knew speaking up would hurt my advancement. So I told myself I was being realistic, strategic, that fighting the system from inside was smarter than dying on that hill." His grip tightened on her hand. "I was wrong. Marielle was right. She died thinking she was weak for withdrawing that complaint. But she wasn't weak. I was. I failed her when it mattered. You spent 39 years making it right. 39 years too late for her. But not too late for Benders, for McKenna, for you." Stone's breathing was labored now. "That's what the obligation taught me. You can't undo failure, but you can honor it by not failing again." The monitors beeped faster. A nurse appeared, checked vitals, adjusted medications. Stone's eyes were closing, but he managed one more sentence. The Medal of Honor ceremony. Tell them Marielle earned it in 90 seconds. Took 39 years to admit it. Kestrel stayed until he slept. Then she walked out into Virginia sunlight carrying the weight of his confession and the knowledge that even warriors who spent decades paying obligations had still carried the memory of when they should have paid sooner. 4 weeks after the verdict, the Pentagon held 2 ceremonies on the same day. The first was at the White House, the East Room filled with 300 attendees. Kestrel stood in the front row, dress white, Stone beside her in wheelchair. He'd refused hospice care for this, refused to miss it. The president approached the podium. Behind him, projected on twin screens, was Marielle's official photo. 1980, 23 years old, combat medic, bright eyes, slight smile. The photo was taken 2 days before Grenada. We gather today, the president began to correct a 39-year oversight. To honor a warrior whose actions on October 25, 1985 saved 4 Marines and embodied the highest traditions of military service. The citation was read aloud, every detail: the tunnel collapse, 3 trips under fire, the grenade, the shrapnel wounds. Kestrel watched Stone's face, tears running unchecked down his weathered cheeks. Corporal Marielle Brennan, the president continued, demonstrated conspicuous gallantry at risk of her own life. She exemplified the warrior ethos mission: first, never leave a fallen comrade, never accept defeat. The medal was presented, blue silk ribbon, gold star, 5-pointed. Stone accepted it with shaking hands. The president leaned close, spoke quietly enough that only Stone heard. Your sister should have received this in 1986, Colonel. I'm sorry it took this long. Stone's voice was barely audible. She knew. She always knew she did the right thing. That's all that mattered to her. After the ceremony, a reception, Pentagon brass, SOCOM commanders, and the Marines Marielle saved. Hayes, now Master Sergeant, 62 years old, approached Stone. They hadn't spoken in 15 years. Sir, I need to say something. 1985, after Grenada. Doc Brennan saved my life, and I never... Hayes's voice broke. I never thanked her properly. Never wrote, never visited. I was young and stupid and thought invincible, and I just moved on. Stone gripped his arm. She didn't save you for thanks. She saved you so you'd live. Did you live well? Yes, sir. 3 kids, 15 grandkids, retired last year. Then you thanked her. That's what she wanted. Diaz and Rourke came next. Same conversation, same guilt, same absolution. 4 Marines, 4 families, dozens of descendants, all existing because Marielle ran into fire 3 times. That's when it hit Kestrel, the real scope of the obligation. Her mother hadn't just saved 4 men. She'd saved everyone those men would ever love. Every child they'd have. Every grandchild, every life they'd touch. The obligation wasn't linear. It was exponential. And now it was hers to carry forward. The second ceremony was 2 hours later. Naval Yard, Stone's retirement. 300 personnel assembled. Largest crowd in decades. Stone had to be helped to the podium. Had to pause for oxygen between sentences. But when he spoke, his voice carried. 41 years, he said. Grenada to Afghanistan. 7 countries, 23 campaigns. But I'll tell you my proudest moment. He pointed to the Medal of Honor on display beside the podium. October 25, 1985. My sister, 23 years old, pulled me from a collapsed tunnel, ran back in 3 times, saved 4 Marines, blood everywhere, wrists shredded. He paused for oxygen. I spent 39 years trying to be worthy of those extra years she gave me. And in the last 6 months, her daughter showed me what that obligation really meant. He removed his own Medal of Honor from his chest, the one he'd earned in Grenada for actions that day. I didn't earn this. Marielle did. She saved me. She saved Hayes Diaz Rourke. She paid the price. So today I give mine to the woman who proved that Marielle's legacy wasn't just saving lives. It was creating warriors who stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. He pinned it on Kestrel's chest, his hands shaking, his breathing labored. Then he saluted her. She returned it, tears streaming down her face. Mission complete, Doc, Stone whispered. Your daughter settled my obligation. The crowd gave standing ovation. Stone collapsed immediately after. Medics rushed forward. He was conscious but fading. Kestrel held his hand as they loaded him into the ambulance. Not yet, she said. You don't get to die yet. You owe me a proper retirement party. Stone managed a weak smile. Didn't owe you. Owed her. 2 weeks later, Stone died in hospice care. peaceful, painless, surrounded by people he'd trained and mentored and taught. His last words, according to the nurse, were, "Tell Marielle I kept fighting." Arlington National Cemetery. Section 60, June 2024. The funeral was military honors, full protocol, flag-draped casket, honor guard, 21 gun salute. Taps played as summer sun filtered through oak trees. Over 1,000 attendees. Pentagon brass, SOCOM commanders. Marines Stone had trained across 4 decades. And in the front row wearing dress whites, Commander Kestrel Brennan stood with Callaway Winters and Roy McKenna. 3 generations. 3 women connected by one man's determination to pay an obligation. The chaplain spoke briefly, recited Stone's service record. Grenada, Panama, Gulf War, Somalia, Fallujah, Afghanistan, 41 years, 7 countries, 23 campaigns. But Kestrel didn't want the chaplain's words. She wanted to speak. She stepped to the podium as the casket was lowered. "My uncle raised me from age 9, she began. Her voice was steady. He taught me to ride bikes and drive cars and shoot rifles. He went to every school event, every graduation. He was the only parent I really knew." Pause. Breath. "But he never stopped being my mother's brother. Never stopped carrying the obligation of October 25th, 1985. And for 39 years, I thought that obligation weighed him down, made him sad, made him unable to move forward." She looked at the casket. "I was wrong. The obligation didn't weigh him down. It lifted him up. It gave him purpose. It made him spend 41 years creating warriors who stand up instead of staying silent, who pay obligations forward instead of ignoring them." The crowd was silent, 1,000 warriors listening. 3 months ago, Uncle Thad had 6 months to live. He could have chosen treatment, hospice, comfort. Instead, he chose mission. One last operation. To stop what he couldn't stop in 1987. To honor my mother by preventing her story from repeating. Kestrel pulled out the Grenada knife, held it up. "This blade is 40 years old. My mother used it to dig 4 Marines from rubble. Uncle Thad carried it for 39 years. Now it's mine. And I will carry it until I find my tunnel, my fire, my chance to pay the obligation forward." She lowered the knife, met eyes with the crowd. Warrior obligations don't die when warriors die. They transfer. They compound. And the only way to honor them is to keep fighting, keep standing up, keep making sure that 39 years from now, someone stands at another funeral and says, they didn't waste the years they were given. The honor guard folded the flag, presented it to Kestrel. She accepted it. 13 folds, each one a prayer, each one a promise. As the crowd dispersed, General Patricia Reeves approached, 60 years old, 3 stars, head of SOCOM oversight. "Commander, I have new orders for you." Kestrel looked up. "Ma'am, effective immediately, you're transferred to SOCOM Training Command. Your assignment, develop and implement the Brennan Protocol across all special warfare training. Teach every operator, male and female, how to identify institutional predation, how to document it, how to stop it." Reeves handed her a folder. Colonel Brennan's last recommendation before he died. He said, "If we're serious about change, we need someone who's proven they can execute it, someone who turned patience into weapon, someone who understands obligation." Kestrel opened into the folder. Inside, curriculum outlines training schedules, authorization for unlimited resources. And on the first page in Stone's handwriting, "Make it systemic, make it permanent, make sure Marielle's story teaches warriors for the next 41 years. She closed the folder, saluted Reeves. "I'll make it count, ma'am." "I know you will. You're a Brennan. Counting is what you do." Kestrel stayed at the grave after everyone left. 2 headstones now, side by side. Colonel Thaddeus Stone Brennan, 1958-2024. He kept his promise. Corporal Marielle Brennan, Medal of Honor, 1962-1998. She saved warriors. She created warriors. Kestrel knelt between them, placed her mother's knife at Marielle's stone, placed Stone's Medal of Honor at his. "I've got it from here," she whispered. "Both of you, rest." The wind moved through oak trees, carried the scent of summer grass and distant rain, and for just a moment Kestrel felt lighter, as if 2 obligations had been transferred, as if 2 warriors were finally at peace, as if the promise made in a Grenada tunnel 39 years ago had finally truly been kept. 6 months later, Coronado SEAL Training Facility. Commander Kestrel Brennan stood in front of 30 female SEAL candidates, the largest class in program history. Enrollment had spiked 200% after the California trial, after the story went public, After women across the military learned that the system could be fixed, that predators could be stopped, that justice was possible. This blade, Kestrel said, holding up the grenada knife, is 40 years old, carried by a combat medic who saved 4 Marines in Grenada, Oshos. Then carried by the Marines she saved. Now it's mine. She looked at the candidates. You want to know what makes a Tier 1 operator? It's not skills, not missions. It's obligation. Every warrior owes someone. Parent who sacrificed. Teacher who believed. Buddy who covered your 6. The only way to repay warrior obligations is to make more warriors. She pointed to Private Rory McKenna, the woman who'd been targeted by Nash, who'd filed complaint with Vaughn, who'd been dismissed, who'd enrolled in SEAL training the day after the verdict. McKenna, who do you owe? Rory stood straight. My mother, ma'am. She told me women didn't belong in combat. I'm here to prove her wrong. Good. Prove her wrong 3 seconds at a time. The training continued, Kestrel teaching her mother's technique, the 3-second protocol that had ended 3 careers and begun reformation, breaking down each fraction of each second, nerve strikes, balance disruption, control positions, making sure every woman in that class knew how to defend herself, how to end threats, how to be warrior instead of victim. At the end of the day, Callaway Winters visited the base, 28 years old now, working for Veterans Affairs, advocating for military sexual assault victims, using her experience and her evidence to help others navigate claims. 47 women have come forward since the trial, Cal told Kestrel. The system's changing. Is it enough? Stone asked me that before he died. I told him it's a start. Starts matter. Cal handed Kestrel an envelope. He left this for you, asked me to give it to you 6 months after his death. Kestrel opened it. Inside was a letter in Stone's precise handwriting. Commander Brennan, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Good. I saw what I needed to see. Your mother gave me 39 years I shouldn't have had. You gave those years meaning. The blade is yours now. The obligation is paid. But here's the thing about warrior obligations. They're not really settled until you pass them on. So find your buried Marine, find your tunnel, and dig them out. That's the only way warriors retire. By making more warriors, the obligation never ends. It just moves forward. And that's how we live forever. Semper Fi, Thaddeus Brennan. Kestrel folded the letter carefully, put it in her pocket next to her mother's knife. That evening, she stood on the Coronado Beach, watching sunset paint the Pacific orange and gold, thinking about obligation. About 3 generations now. Marielle to Stone, to Kestrel, to the 30 women training to be SEALs. Thinking about pattern, how rot had spread for 39 years, but had been stopped in 3 seconds. Thinking about justice, how it could be delayed, but never truly denied if someone was willing to be patient enough, precise enough, certain enough. Her phone buzzed. Text from Rory McKenna. Ma'am, quick question about the nerve strike angle in second 1. Can you show me tomorrow? Kestrel typed back, 0600. Training room, bring coffee. She smiled, put the phone away. The sun was setting, the day ending, but the obligation continued, passing forward, compounding, growing with each generation. Marielle had saved 4 Marines. Stone had trained hundreds. Kestrel would train thousands, and each of them would train thousands more, until the day came when predators learned that uniform meant honor, when complaints were heard instead of dismissed, when victims became survivors and survivors became warriors. That day was coming, not today, not tomorrow, but coming, because warrior obligations didn't expire. They just waited for the right people to collect them, and the collection had begun, 3 seconds at a time.